You snooze, you lose. This is episode 1 of the fight show that will break down how to beat the fighter that you probably despise. So you're going to love the fact that we're going to break those individuals down. So, hey, name one guy that you really don't care about seeing, one guy that you don't believe is the real deal. Think about that guy that you truly wish was not on top, and you want to see that person get the smoke. This is the show for that. And what we're going to do today is break down Francis Ngannou. He will be victim number 1 for this show. But before I get started, I'd like to introduce myself. For those of you who've never watched this show, boy, you're late to the dance. My name is Eric A. Bradley, coach, that is, and we teach boxing. So I like to, before I dive into this juicy conversation, I like to give a special shout out to our sponsors, jabjuice.com, the leader in innovation in social media management, brand building, and giving those in the world of combat a voice that they've never had before. You don't have to be Manny Pacquiao or Canelo Alvarez these days to have your voice and to blow your business up. All you need to know is how to go to jabjuice.com and get yourself in the place that you've always wanted to get to and have a voice in today's social media world of AI and innovation. So long, and that's all I got for that conversation. Now we're going to dive directly into the fight that we have coming up, which is the guy named Francis Ngannou, who's from the sport of MMA, and he once was taught how to box. Now, what I'm going to do is I was going to give you the play by play, but then I thought a lot about it and I said that I think what I need to do is save some of this content, proprietary content, for those of my people who are on our Facebook subscription. And that's what I'm going to do. But I'm going to go dive into sharing with you what this ending was like, where I closed it out, because there were 5 pillars that you have to concentrate on knowing. And one of those pillars is where fighters and coaches cross over and they don't understand one another the way they think they do, is where you find current trainers doing film studies and still they go into a fight and their fighter gets blown away in a one-sided hailstorm. So how could you have spent an entire training camp studying film, coming up with a game plan, and never looking like you trained a day of your life for boxing? There's a several reasons why that is one, when you look at film, you have to understand that there are different variations and variables that you have to pay attention to. Okay? Because one thing is to tell you how to do something, tell your kid to go to school and make straight A's, tell your daughter not to have a boyfriend in the car when she turns 18 and is able to drive on her own. I know she gets her license at 16, but by the time it's time to let her drive by herself with a guy, she's 18. But it's going to happen. It's exactly the same analogy that I'll reach down into that bucket and I'll tell you and explain very clear. When you're looking at a fight and the boxers who are currently in the sport have trainers who have probably fought as an amateur, maybe had a couple of professional fights, but they were learning from this tree. And the only thing you can get from that tree is several apples, maybe some leaves and a couple of branches, but the roots of that thing and the bark and the soil inside that surrounds that tree is guarded. And it's guarded by the gods of boxing. Not everybody will get it. And I don't care if you fought, I don't care if you've worked side by side with a trainer who's from that lineage, they're not going to give it to you because it's sacred. And so when you see these guys doing these film studies with their fighters, Hence is why when I had Cambosis on the show, I was being real, I was being raw, and I was being authentic. And I was letting him know what you're seeing is not what you're getting. When you fight someone like Lopez, you are not just dealing with a cutie. You're dealing with a cutie that can knock you out with one shot. That's not the typical cutie. You're talking about Chris Birds. You're talking about people who are super slippery, like Willie Pep. You're talking about Bernard Hopkins, who embraced that slick cutie style of boxing. These guys are hard to touch. Sweet Pea, The Matrix. It's more to it than that. So when you think about this, when you cultivate this beautiful landscape of how these guys get to this place in boxing, and you break it down, and they are watching the film, but they don't understand exactly what they're seeing. Number one, you're watching a technique. You're teaching techniques in the gym. And with those techniques comes skill that follows, and skills and sets. And when you're doing these things, I'm going to break down exactly what 5 layers go when you're talking about breaking down a fight in high level boxing. Not some of that local stuff you guys are doing, but the real high level stuff where you are, like I said before, you're watching these guys get into a ring and they get blown away. That's not understanding boxing. And so you're learning these skills, and then you're so excited because the trainer is happy. He knows how to do these mitts where you create the reaction drills. He knows how to beat a good sparring partner. He knows how to take his fighter out on a quest for some smoker sparring. He had a heck of a peak week. So he's excited. He had a great press conference. The press conference went, everything he was talking about was just landing. But when you break down fighting at a high level, none of those things are relevant. You see, the relevance is knowing the adaptability and the ability to make an adjustment inside of a fight, and to be able to carry that fight out in several components. Number one, when you go back to Evander Holyfield and Mike Tyson, you go back to Jerry Cooney versus Michael Spinks. These are the things that you're going to hear on this full broadcast. The broadcast is a breakdown, and it's in their Facebook's subscriber portal. So if you want to see this whole thing and get notes and take notes and all of that stuff, then that's where you go. You go subscribe. I'm going to give you a once over. It's definitely not the breakdown, but I'm going to tell you, when you're doing this, first you have to know how to do. You have to have the skill to pay the bill. And I actually do I bring up the film and really go over the film with you. So we take 60 seconds of the Tyson Fury versus Ngannou fight, and we break down when Ngannou is using his left hand, he's going to not be in a position where he can fight against an elite level fighter. Now, with boxing skills, he can fight. But the difference in that fight was Mike Tyson being in camp. When you haven't developed a jab is something that's not established over a couple of years. A jab is established over a career. And that's where I'm saying we're going to lean on the weakness. It's just like if you're playing for the Miami Dolphins and you play against the Kansas City Chiefs and it's 20 degrees below zero, you play with their weakness. You bring them into the cold and you beat them where they're weak. And so that's exactly where this kid is weak. Regardless of how decent it looked, with no footage being on the table to study him from, now there's footage. So Anthony Joshua will need to operating going to the right. And from that, he has to also have this other component in there, and that is knowing that he has to bring a vibration with that. The next thing he'll need, skills and sets, because the lateral movement will be one part of the skill. And being able to counter with a drop and roll to bury himself on the left side of Ngannou is a vital detail, and it's not yet to be looked at lightly. When you go to the Michael Spinks versus Jerry Cooney fight, you see this exact same strategy being exercised because Jerry Cooney could knock out a small bear. He was 6'7", biggest man in boxing since Jess Willard back in the turn of the 20th century. You got to realize that these are different kinds of guys. So Michael Spinks coming up from light heavyweight, no, you can't do anything with a guy that size without strategy and understanding how to develop your skills and sets. And once you're able to do that, now you're going to not only box him smart, you're going to fight a strategy that's going to require that you have intestinal fortitude, because you have to have the courage of a burglar to throw that combination punch whenever you get to that side and he's worn down from missing you and feeling awkward because he's come from the world of MMA. He's been fighting in a cage his whole career. And now he's doing something that not a lot of real boxers can do good. So if you're a heavyweight and you haven't been boxing but for a few years, like serious training, I know because they asked us to do work with them in a camp. So I understand where they were and where they are today, which is definitely developed much better and unexpectedly good that night. And with a little bit of lack of data from Tyson Fury to study, it was kind of, he was on quiz street. And you can't help but underestimate a guy a little bit when you've never seen him box smart. So that's how you train. But when you get him going to that direction and you're starting to really capitalize like Tyson Fury did, Anthony Joshua hits much harder. And Anthony Joshua is much more of a slicker now kind of fighter than he was 2 years ago. So before he was very stiff and he was lethargic. Now he's slick with his move because I know he studies the page. I know he's getting good training, and I know he's been through several different people where he's seen things that he needed to add, but he just hadn't added them. Now he can execute these moves, a drop and roll move. He can bend his knees, sit down in his stance, and get to the left side of Ngannou. And he can operate from there, just like Michael Spinks did. And he hits really hard. And he's very experienced. And he's got an Olympic pedigree. It's a lot to deal with. So when you're talking about this, I'm going to not get deeper into it. I'm going to let the rest of this thing lie where it may. I'm going to show you where I closed it out when I recorded this earlier for you. And then I'll let you guys be the judge of this thing. Because the fighter that I'm going to jump on his ass this time is Inoue. And I'm going to show you down to the very last compound how to beat Inoue. I don't give a damn because I can do that. You get it? So if you're a fan of him, you better tag him and let him know, hey, man, this dude's about to break you down. Here's what the fight will look like. Anthony Joshua will come out and he'll dictate the jab, because what he's going to do after that, he's going to make Ngannou throw a jab that he's not confident about. You can't be confident in the jab if you haven't been throwing that thing for over 10 years. When you go out there, you're not a real pure kind of guy who's been trained to just box. You're a good fighter. You had to be groomed to stay disciplined. And when Mike Tyson came into that camp, that was the difference. Even though Dewey is a great coach, the difference was Mike Tyson in that last fight, giving them that food, telling them these things, pushing him in places in that training camp that made him realize this is not, I'm hallucinating. So I got to get the reality. Same way I did with George Kambosos. I told him, boy, you're not messing with a regular slick fighter when you're fighting against Lopez. You better ante up. You can go and watch that fight show, right? So when it's all said and done, you better go in there when you're going up against that boy. And when he come in there throwing them things, you got to move like you mean it. And you got to move those legs, and you got to turn that thing to the right constantly. And it's going to be uncomfortable. But when you do it enough times and you start throwing that left hook to the liver, bah, boom, boom, and out of there, it's going to look really awkward. Do it that way. And when you do it that way and you have the purpose, when he turn around, you start to catch him with that overhand right to the temple. And down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. It looks just like that. And it can just be that straight laser right hand that you got, because you're talking power for power. Tyson Fury ain't never been no one-punch knockout guy. Anthony Joshua can knock you out. And so that's what the fight like. If he just listens, you do that way and have the right algorithm and use your shoulders the right way, know how to nudge him, know how to become uncomfortable in the boxing ring. Because I don't care what you do. One thing you ain't been is in the boxing ring a lot. And you just don't learn boxing overnight. So I don't give a damn. Now you got enough footage on him to say this is what he looks like in the boxing ring. This is what he's bringing. This is what you do. You break that fucker and you bring that mindset and you go in there with the algorithm of a fighter. You just watch the first episode of You Snooze, You Lose. That's all I got. I'm about to go. And I see you guys all soon in the winner's circle. Special shouts out to all of my new members of Top Trainer University. Special shouts out to you guys. Special shout out to all of my brothers in Champions University. Those are the people who are professional level fighters and coaches. So we got guys, contenders. We got Olympians going into the 2024 Olympics. It's just a beautiful thing when God has blessed you with so many good things because of the sport of boxing, your commitment. So no matter what your journey is, commit to it. There's no shortcuts in boxing. I'm going to tell you the honest truth. If you don't have proper mentorship, get under the right banner and learn the right way, because we'll eat ass alive. I promise you, you ain't slipping through the cracks. All right? So do it right, because you ain't slipping through the cracks. In 3 years, you better know it ain't going to be no slipping through the cracks. And if you go and look at these young Olympian kids fighting right now, yo, these boys is no joke. The next level generation, they got access to much more. And so you got coaches, the teachers, the professors of the game, like myself and these other guys who are doing it. There are only 3 heads on the top of this thing now. So don't be fooled. Don't be fooled by guys who just because they got fighters. See, we ain't coaches. We are professors. There are levels to this shit. That's all I got. Be blessed. Godspeed. Get the hell off my page.